Good evening and welcome to another episode of Apolitically Incorrect Guyana. My name is KIAN JABOUR and I am here with my co-host, Mr. Timothy Jonas. I do want to apologize for not being here last week. It was Valentine's
Day. I don't think anyone was very interested.
Yeah,
They had other priorities, and they're right.
We love Guyana, but then we also have other things we love. Nonetheless, what we're going to try to do, which I'm going to commit to you guys as I'm going to do my best, I promise, every week, because we are in an elections year. All right. And the fact of the matter is, I got a lot, honestly, more messages than I thought I would have from people, what's going on? Why aren't you on today? So that was a pleasant surprise, but at the same time, I apologize for, not being, just not having the time, unfortunately. I will say, though, I might not have the time next week. I'm out the country, so.
Well, first week we have a problem, but okay. But what we want to make clear to everybody is that while everyone is aware that we are pointing at third parties because we believe that there needs to be a third party to swing parliament, our conversation is going to try to point to issues and solutions to those issues and direct attention to why a third party is the key to any of those solutions. But I want you to check and to challenge us and to see, if we don't stick to it, that you will find that we are even-handed as anybody can possibly be in Guyana in terms of where we give praise and where we criticize. We will try our best to be speaking to facts, but that will be the premise, that this is about third parties, or else we are doomed.
Yes. As a matter of fact, we were going to start. Okay, I'll even share it for you guys, just so all of those who don't know whether they want to watch or not. We have an abundance of topics today because we missed the whole week. But part of the conversations today are the extradition laws that have just been passed, the deportee conversation that is happening with the American government sending criminals from Africa and Asia to Guyana. We were going to speak about the Transparency International report and the new oil refinery that's being proposed and a couple other things. Oh, obviously, the Madia situation that is now heading back to court, it seems, with the dorm room fire, which, in my opinion, is the worst tragedy to have hit this country. And the mother of two of the young ladies that perished seems to be attempting to sue the government over that matter, which we'll discuss in a bit. But before I get to that, I'd like to have a conversation. You brought up the third party conversation, and I think it's important that I keep pointing this out now because it's been my topic of conversation over the last 2 weeks in my social circles. Tim, I don't know if you've been paying as close attention as I have, but there are some players in the social dynamic of Guyana that is going around to different villages and communities and doing charitable work and, listening to people's issues and helping citizens wherever they can. And the response from the people, according to the videos and social media chatter and, everything else alike, as one more point, and the attacks from the government have really shown that there seems to be a large support base in this country for anybody except for PNC and PPP. There just seems to be a gap now in the market in the electorate, where people have realized that, if we keep bouncing back and forth between these two, how far are we getting? You watch the government do their job, which is their job, marketing and publicity, celebrating the progress in certain areas, bridges being built, roads being built. I even had the pleasure of going to the energy conference this past week, and the government is doing their job for praise, but then simultaneously we're watching things like the cash grant distribution, and we're watching things like within the last couple of days, we saw a social media figure, because we're not going to call him politician because he's not at this point in time, but Azruddin Mohammed went into Black Bush Polder, which PPP stronghold, and had a phenomenal response. likewise, he's gone into areas like All Boys Town and so on and had phenomenal responses. People literally chanting, next president of Guyana. And I just have found it so interesting that the response that they have been getting really and truly to me signifies that people are looking for something else.
Yeah, it's an interesting dynamic that's developing, and it makes you curious about the why, what's causing it.
Right.
You see, there's definitely an appetite for something different. One thing that's happened, and this is the peculiarity of the change that happened in 2015 and the change back that happened in 2020. Those ordinary folk that you're talking about, those people who have not seen money coming into their pockets, although they've seen money going all over the place.
Right.
They are disillusioned with both of the groups. They're disillusioned with PPP and PNC.
Yeah.
They're not happy. Now, there was a time when everyone was poor or relatively poor, when the entire country was poor.
Yeah.
So that the standard of living was on par for almost everyone. We all lived in wood houses. And it was easy in those circumstances, living close to the land, to rely on race, to rely on ethnicity. I think what's happening in our small society is we are confronted every single day by enormous wealth. Politicians and their friends showing signs of plenty money moving back and forth. You're seeing huge trucks going all over the place. You're seeing infrastructure going up, contracts being awarded. And the poor at the bottom of the economic ladder are confronted with that, and they're not happy because they are living in the same squalid conditions they always lived in, and they're not seeing anything coming to them. That is not resolved by making them line up without dignity for $100,000.
Yeah.
$100,000 is 500 US. That is what some of those folks spend on gasoline for their 4 vehicles in a month. It's not going to change the perception that is more and more apparent. And the perception is those two parties don't care about us. Therefore, there's an appetite for something else. And here comes someone who is showing generosity. And he's not showing generosity with taxpayers' money, with promises about the future, with talk about how we're making the society better. He's doing things that are immediately beneficial, advantageous to the individuals he is interfacing with. Now, whether that's sound economic policy or not on a holistic scale doesn't matter to those people.
Yeah.
Those people see help coming in a human way from a human being that they can see and touch. And that is giving hope that this may be a representation of a plausible third party. And that's why they're chanting.
Right. Yeah.
I think that's what it's about.
And you've for my watchers that, religiously, tune in on Fridays, you've heard me say over and over how razor thin the numbers are here in Guyana. How every election shows just how polarized the population is to the two main parties. And their voter bases don't change that much. But what you do realize is that 10, 15,000 people in the middle, that's all. Just 10 or 15,000 people are the factors that determine who the president of this country is, who the government of this country is.
Yes.
And we watched that over the last 3 election cycles, going into the 4th now. We've watched those numbers even less than 15,000 because 2011 was a minority government. You had 7 seats that swung.
Well, I wanted to say that because in 2011, in its heyday, AFC attracted 35,000
votes.
So when you're talking about the careful balance, and you're talking about 10 or 15,000, 20 years ago, it was 35,000.
Yeah.
Now, granted, a large proportion of them may have gravitated back to their entrenched positions because of what happened. But I don't think it's come down to 10. I think we're still at about 20,000 on that swing. I think that swing is there.
No, I'm actually going to go as far as saying, even if they have gone back to their respective parties, what has happened is obviously that 35,000, those 7 seats were split back between PPP and PNC. And why I say that is because if you fast forward to 2015, when everybody then became polarized again, we done with PPP, they corrupt, they're bullies, they blah, blah, blah. They ruled for too long. APNU AFC only won by 1 seat, which is Charandas' seat, which is equal to what? 6,000 votes?
6,000 votes.
So that 35,000 obviously just went completely split down the middle back to their respective areas. and one seat determined it. Now, jump even further ahead, where all of us have decided APNU did a horrible job, whatever was wrong with them, they mismanaged the economy, money stopped flowing, people were upset, yada, yada. Polarized right back to stating, we got to get rid of them and we're going to vote them out. And then PPP won the 2020 election, currently by one single seat.
Right.
PPP are in power by one seat.
Right.
Again, another 7,000. So we're moving in now to 2025 election, which is where we are. And I'm sorry, I'm not seeing, I'm watching an interesting pattern play out again with the other political parties that are coming to front now. And then again, between your on the ground social chatter, I mean, all of us are having it in our social circles. All we're hearing is people being unhappy, discontent with what is currently going on in the country. And if they're not going back to APNU, the riggers, and they're done with PPP because they're not making their lives better, we're looking at...
I think that's where we are. You have a recognition, and nobody in the country can seriously dispute it, that you are faced with corruption on the one hand, and dishonest willingness to undermine democracy and to cheat on the other hand.
Right.
So you're between the devil and the deep blue sea.
Yeah.
Now, the people who are entrenched don't care, because on one side they say our people better than those horrible people, and that's fine, they're entrenched. But more and more, you do have those folk who are willing to say, I'm stepping away and I'm doing something different.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of the entrenched folk will come back and say you can't trust third parties. That's a stupidity. That is something that doesn't even need an answer.
Yeah.
Because the immediate response to that is, so you trust the corrupt or you trust the riggers.
Right.
I mean, so that's the end of that conversation immediately. But I can tell you, and I'll tell you my own personal position. As someone who grew up in a PNC household, I voted for AFC as soon as they appeared because PNC had not been doing a good job. And when PNC got into power and did their foolishness, I voted against PNC and AFC. So you will find that there is a core, and I think it's about 20,000 Guyanese, who will look at your performance and say, this party does not own me. I am willing to go elsewhere.
Yeah.
Now, there is also a core of people who are afraid. They're afraid that those terrible other people will get into power. That is something hopefully we can overcome by simply pointing out that it was overcome in 2011, it was overcome in 2015, and it was overcome in 2020.
Yeah.
There is no longer a real chance that somebody can take away your democratic right. We have seen that, we have fought it. You can now vote happily knowing that if you're not satisfied, you can change those people out. And I think 20,000 people in Guyana understand that that's the truth.
I like it. I completely agree with you. And obviously, just on a macro level, 2025 elections, I think is going to be a lot more interesting than people are, than the two parties are leading you to believe. I think the margins are still down razor thin, as you said. One thing I think needs to be pointed out here, and we're actually gonna shift into the extradition conversation, because I think this is such an important conversation that Guyanese need to be having right now as it relates to their rights, to their protection as people. But before I shift into that, I did want to speak a little bit about the cash grant distribution that's been ongoing. And Tim, I don't know. I actually, you know what? We have a video, don't we, Robbie? Of the cash grant distribution. Before I even have a conversation about it, there's a news clip that came up, and I asked, I'm gonna share it, and hopefully we can have a conversation about it after. So go ahead.
Confusion erupted in All Boys on Tuesday morning as scores of residents gathered to collect their government cash grant, leading to the police intervention and a temporary suspension of the process. Dozens of people, including mothers with babies, senior citizens, and individuals on clutches, assembled on the tarmac along All Boys Street, hoping to receive their much-needed financial assistance. However, the scene quickly turned disorderly as attendees struggled to organize themselves, prompting police officers to step in to restore order. Backup was called as the crowd remained uncooperative, further complicating the situation. Some frustrated residents expressed their disappointment over the lack of organization.
It's disorganized. You understand? I was here since early. Earlier, first of all, they came late. Then they start taking the friends or whoever they know, cards from behind. And then another thing, the checks them are mixed up. You gotta go, you check your name, they got it A here, B here, and all kind of thing. They themselves is causing this kind of confusion. They themselves is causing it. They're disorganized. They create this chaos we got here now. They create it. Checking names from behind and all kind of thing. I stand right in front, and seeing 4 or 5 ID cars passing behind me, up to now they can't check. I take a day off to come here. You understand? I here from since early morning and I can't get you. They're disorganized, they know what they're doing right.
I personally feel that a better system should have been applied here in categories. Even if the list is jumbled up, if you have senior citizens sit in one side, pregnant women in one line, and people in the elderly line all morning, I shift in trying to assist. I'm not working with the system because in my community and I don't like CKS, I'm trying to assist. But what happening? The staff themselves is causing the problem. Because when you have a line organized here, instead of the work with the organized line, a friend calling John Jones, a friend calling Tom Jones, and since Tom Jones down to John Jones, a crowd follow. And the crowd swinging and swinging and swinging and swinging. That's the reality. If they apply, and I hope they take this as an example. When they're doing this distribution, in any community they go, put the senior citizen one side, have staff deal with them. Pregnant women one side, have staff deal with them. And all the other line in one line, and you get an orderly system. You can't, they have people here is 60 years, 70 years, 80 years in the crowd. It shouldn't be. It shouldn't be. We must show more care for our senior citizens.
After a period of escalation.
Well, there you have it. You know, this is just one of the many, many clips that have been all over social media, all over, WhatsApp and different platforms. And everywhere you go, it's huge lineups of people just there to collect the checks. Horribly, horribly uncomfortable conditions, especially for senior citizens and disabled. People taking days off of work to go and get their 500,000. And then the second part of it was you then had to go to the bank to get your money and then line up again for 2 days.
And the banks are overwhelmed.
And the banks are overwhelmed. Now, the first thing I have to point out about this is if you are not interpreting these images as a desperate society, as an impoverished society, as people that are struggling to survive, then you are looking at it from a biased point of view. Because what you have seen here from that one clip, and again, go onto social media, go ahead, look around. You're watching a lack of organization, a lack of care. And I'm going to say this, this is the political side of it. You've watched an attempt to buy votes now backfire. All right? And that's the truth.
Well, I think that's an interesting twist on it, you see, because this plan originated in a way that was demonstrably incompetent. Mm-hmm. You remember it started out $200,000 a household.
Yes.
Something that could not work. Mm-hmm. From day one, everybody laughed.
Right.
So after Parliament was informed that Cabinet had decided, Cabinet in its wisdom, I mean, those people sat down in a room and talked about this like managers with competence and decided that could work. And after Parliament was informed, the next day they had to back away from that. And then we heard, all right, $100,000 a person. That was equally bad. It was equally childish, equally infantile. Rich people get the same money as poor people. Old people get the same money as young people. Disabled people get the same money as able-bodied people. Employed, unemployed, same money. Silly. It was also poorly implemented, but it's done in a way, just like the cash handouts with the children, the school children, with the farmers, handing out hopefully white envelopes in a nice visible show that our government cares. You remember, because we care? It was the same underlying political principle that we wanted to show that we're giving you something and you're smiling and saying how grateful you are, and we get a nice photo opportunity out of it. And it has backfired. So it was a political gimmick, implemented poorly, thought out poorly.
Yeah.
And now it's backfiring, and it's in an election year. We'll see what comes of it.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I'd like to highlight something that's very interesting that's been brought to me by multiple people. And funny enough, somebody just wrote it on Facebook between all the hate messages. And as I watch it. But nonetheless, somebody brought up, which is such an interesting conversation, is how many Guyanese, what this has shown here, so many Guyanese don't have bank accounts. And if there's one thing that you're getting, I've spoken to tellers, people that have reached out to me and said, it's unbelievable how many people are showing up here with a check and saying, just please give us our cash. No depositing, XYZ, because everybody knows if you have a bank account, you can just take the check, put it in a white envelope and go to the machine and deposit it. But these lines indicate that people are desperate for this cash in their hand and don't have bank accounts.
That's part of the problem. And we've said it before, that this needed to be part of a system that incentivized folk to, first of all, regularize themselves with NIS, declare for NIS, register with NIS, but also to get onto the system so that they're declaring their yearly GRA, their yearly tax, they have bank accounts. Now, we talked about this before, that in India, they have implemented a system where every child born has an account allocated to that child and money put in monthly. So that by the time that child is 16, that child not only has a bank account, but has a nest egg or cash fund to decide if he's going to spend it on university or if he's going to spend it on business, whichever way he's inclined. If we could do that through NIS, so that instead of saying you get $100,000 for every Guyanese child born, you say no. When a child is born, you open an account and you start putting money quarterly into that account, some of which the mother can access.
Right.
You then have a system that is streamlined, but it will also avoid the rush and the lineup we just saw and the rush to the bank. It will also avoid the arbitrariness, and people will know that this is the system, these are the rules. They'll know their entitlement. Where we have a system of arbitrariness that we hold our breath, poor people holding their breath to wait to see if next year the government will give them another 100,000 or some other kind of cash grant, as if you're getting largesse from God.
Right.
That should not be how a country is run.
Correct.
I agree that cash grants should be made to the people who need it.
Yes. Yes.
I can't criticize that decision, but in terms of its
equitable distribution,
in terms of its implementation, it has not been done correctly. You cannot give rich people the same amount that you're giving poor people.
I completely agree.
By doing that, if you have a pool of money, you have immediately wasted half of the money because you've given it to people that don't.
You're giving the single mother with 3 children under 18 years old $100,000 to maintain her and her household, or to help her, while you are giving $300,000 to the mother and the father married with an 18-year-old.
Don't worry with that.
That's craziness.
The owner of Tulsi Prasad, the owner of Pegasus Hotel, these people don't have gaffers. These people are entitled to $100,000 just like that single mother with 3 children.
Absolutely. Absolutely. No, it's absolutely flawed. And it goes to show that it was just a blanket gimmick to photo op. Nonetheless backfired. What's an interesting part of this is I'm going to go into something that I think has to, because we're running through here, and this is such an important topic to me right now, Tim, is Guyana, the government, the PPP government, with their majority in parliament, has just recently passed the extradition laws here in Guyana. So these extradition laws, we saw a lot of collaboration between America and Guyana to formulate these laws, and then even more so implement them now. I think it was in the news maybe 2 or 3 days ago, a team had come down in order to assist Guyana in setting the system up. All right. And to the point where someone has already been extradited out of Guyana. I think it was a hit and run case that they claimed. America said that somebody had knocked somebody, a man had knocked and killed somebody in America, and they wanted him for their case. Now, Tim, I don't think there are many things that I am more scared of than living in my country and somebody telling me I did a crime somewhere else and my government shipping me out. All right? It's not funny at all. It's terrifying to me. All right? And we need to have a discussion right now on the systems that are being implemented for extradition out of this country and what you believe. And I think this is an important conversation for you as a senior counsel lawyer here in Guyana, to discuss what kind of systems you think need to be set up in order to protect the citizens of Guyana.
Okay. I don't have a problem with extradition proceedings as a concept.
Okay.
You see, you can't have a system where somebody commits murder or rape or manslaughter or something in another country, comes here, stays under the radar, and thinks that he's immune.
Yeah. Agreed.
It is a first principle of our social contract or responsibility in society that you got to be answerable for your wrongdoing.
Agreed.
So the question then is not so much should people be made to answer, but how it's done. How is it going to be done? I know that the norm, and this is what happens in most countries, and I think that our legislation is going to implement it, is first of all, you don't just arbitrarily get picked up, snatched up, and you're gone.
Yeah.
The first thing that has to happen is that a tribunal in Guyana hears the application for the extradition. So, US government sends down, or English government sends down, saying, you got Jonas there in Guyana who committed a crime in my country, and I need you to send him to my country so that he can be tried and punished. Nothing wrong with that, but it would be wrong you snatch up Jonas, a Guyanese citizen, and you ship him off without anything further. So the first thing that needs to happen is that there needs to be a fair inquiry by a magistrate or a judge in Guyana to look at the underlying facts to be satisfied that, first of all, yes, it's probable, it's plausible that this man did commit the offense in that country, but more than that, you don't just ship him off for that reason. First of all, you satisfy yourself that he's going to get fair treatment in whatever country you're sending him off to. There are countries that impose terrible punishment for the simplest crimes. It can't be our public policy and our law that we know that if somewhere in some country they hang you for a simple offense, that you get extradited to that country for the offense. I'll give you an example. There are Pacific Islands where possession of marijuana is an offense that is punishable by death. I think Singapore still has that kind of law. It cannot be, if our public policy is this is considered a relatively minor offense, you might even go to jail for it, that the Singaporean government calls here and says, that man had marijuana in Singapore, we need you to extradite him so we can try him. And we say, yes, send him off to be hanged. So having decided that it's plausible that he committed the offense, you then have to satisfy yourself he'll get a fair break, a fair hearing in whatever court system that country has, and the country's system of laws will impose a fair punishment. In Europe, I can tell you now, European countries will not extradite people to America to face murder charges, because in the States they still kill you. They still put you in they hang you, or they put you in the electric chair and that kind of thing. Because Europe has decided that the death penalty is contrary to human rights, a view which I share, they will not extradite anyone to America to face the death penalty.
Okay.
That is part of it. So for me, if someone is here who it is demonstrated is likely to have been guilty, and a local court says, yes, there's enough evidence, you need to go and face that trial, and the court is satisfied the trial will be fair, and if you're found guilty, the punishment will be commensurate, will not be draconian, I think that extradition proceedings are important to make sure that we don't become a safe haven for criminals, people hiding out from the authorities who've done something wrong and then come here to get away. And it's a principle and a system that exists almost worldwide. Well, so I support it.
Yeah, and my takeaway from this, though, and it's just on how I view the conversation should have been had, and again, still waiting to see. I think, again, as I spoke, someone has already been extradited, is I think what's important is that person be given at least a fair hearing here as to what exactly has occurred wherever is requesting that person's extradition, in order for Guyanese judicial system to determine whether or not this should occur.
Good, I agree. But then I will add one more factor that I think is critically important, because we tend to forget that we're a sovereign nation. It got to be mutual.
Oh, good, excellent.
So if our government sends to the states to say, hey, they got a man there named John Doe who has been guilty of dangerous driving here are the facts, send him down to be tried.
Right.
They got to send him down, whether he's Guyanese or whether he's American.
Yeah.
Because if they want Guyanese citizens to reach up there to face their law,
yeah,
an American citizen who commits a crime here must be sent back here to face our law. And if it's not mutual, it can't work. Agreed.
I'm gonna. You brought up a conversation just now. You hit a key term, and this is one of the important conversations to be had right now, because it's a worldwide issue that's occurring, which is the American government is now putting countries like Guyana and Panama and Grenada and different countries on the list in order to be part of their mass deportation out of America of people, and in this case, criminals from Africa or Asia that they want to send here to be imprisoned or to be, I guess, to live. I'm not, I can't tell you the details because what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring up, ask Robbie to bring up the graphic, which just has a little clip under it. It has to do with the deportees, the government speaking with U.S. authorities about sending back non-Guyanese criminals. You got it there, Robbie? I know I throw you off with the numbers. My apologies. We've gone haywire.
Confusion erupted in all boys on Tuesday morning. A scores
Yeah,
of
not that one,
residents gathered to
Robbie.
collect their
Right. Sorry. There we have it. So what I'll just it changed over. So what it is here, guys, is basically the news clip says president says government discussing movement and flight of people with U.S. but no agreement has been made. So what the article states is, with the American network CBS reporting that the U.S. government has considered a plan to send third country deportees to Guyana as part of its mass deportation of undocumented immigrants. President Ali today said while there has been discussions on the matter and migration with the U.S. Secretary of State, there has been no talk about having deportees sent to Guyana. Now, again, what has developed from this, I think this article is a little bit old because, well, I guess it does state it right there. It's already in the news networks in America. So whether this government has had the conversation or not, clearly the conversation is being had up there. And then we've watched countries, like I said, Grenada and Panama, that have both been on polar ends of this situation because they are on the list as well. I think Grenada said we are not accepting anyone. You cannot send deportees from other countries here. And Panama saying, yes, they will accept them. What's your take on this?
Well, I like to ask people to step back and think about right and wrong. Think about ethics. You have a country like the States who has their own body of laws. And let me tell you what happened. Their body of laws does not allow them to deport folk to countries that are seen to be oppressive. Afghanistan is the first example that comes to mind. So poor Donald Trump got a problem. He made a big hue and cry during the election campaign about these terrible non-Americans who are here stealing jobs. And now he's got to figure out a way to deport them. And he does it in a way that shows such callous disregard of any kind of human rights that I don't know how he sleeps at night, I'll tell you the truth. So this is the solution. You can't send them to Afghanistan, so you send them to Panama. And indeed, the states have been sending folk to ask various countries if they will accept deportees from America who are not citizens of those countries. So Panama has apparently received Indian nationals, Afghani, Iraqi nationals. And the latest news is that Panama has sent those people to what they call a migrant camp. They say it's not a detention camp, it's a migrant camp. I don't know the difference between the two. If you can't walk out the door, it's a detention camp.
We've heard about those around the world already.
In the jungle, pending further processing. So you have a group of people, including women and children, terrified, don't know what their future is, have no clue what tomorrow is going to look
Where
like.
they're going, what exactly.
They've been rounded up like cattle. And because it's no longer America's problem because they've been sent off, all is well. Now, if that was ever an abdication of responsibility, I don't know what is.
Right.
Now, kudos to Grenada. Grenada is a little tiny country. Grenada was invaded back in 1980 by the same Americans in the Morris Bishop affair. But that little tiny country had the backbone to say, no, we are not accepting anybody. We're in an election year. The Guyana government has apparently been approached with the same request. You need to start accepting non-Guyanese deportees from America because America, the great America, has this policy that they're getting rid of all of their illegal immigrants. So we don't care where they go. We don't know how they got in. They got in because there's a flaw in our system, but we're getting them out. And we're getting them out the easy way. Not properly. Not sending them back after a just hearing to a place that we know they'll be safe, ignoring all their human rights, we just getting them out. And after that's your problem. I don't blame President Ali for his response. Because when President Ali was confronted with this at Pegasus, I don't even know if he had had a discussion at cabinet, if any policy decision had been arrived at. I don't know. So it was perfectly reasonable for him to say a decision has not yet been made. I want to make that clear. But in an election year, the fear arises that you may have made a decision you know is unpopular, because there's no doubt that the Americans got all kind of pressure to put on you to make you do what they want.
Right.
So you may have bowed to the pressure, but you're trying to keep it quiet until the elections. I hope that's not the case, and I don't know. But what I hope to see, and what I'm calling on anybody who can do it, to publicly say on behalf of the government that whether or not the request has formally been made, we will not be accepting non-Guyanese deportees into Guyana, because I, for one, don't want to see any. We have our own societal issues. We have our institutions are frail and are barely holding on the strain. We have Brazilians, we have Venezuelans, we have increasing numbers of foreigners here. Our culture is on the strain. Our schools are overcrowded. Our hospitals can't manage. How on earth can we justify bringing in deportees with an uncertain future and we don't know what's going to happen? Beside the fact that it is totally unfair to the people, it breaks all kinds of human rights. You cannot keep people in prison who have committed no crime. So you bring them here and you're breaking the law by keeping them in prison for a long period of time. I would like to see our government announce unequivocally, publicly, that America has approached them and they will not be accepting any foreign deportees, or America has not approached them, but if they do, Guyana will not be accepting non-Guyanese deportees.
Excellent. Yeah, I'm in complete agreement with that position. And again, one of the large parts of this and how my mind kind of processes this type of scenario is the fact that you touched on it, is the fact that these people have not committed any crimes in Guyana. So what exactly will they be coming here to, just land here and live on the streets?
Well, how will we keep them locked up?
Well, exactly. You can't detain them.
So they haven't done anything wrong here. They can't be in prison. They can't be detained lawfully.
Right.
So then what?
There you go. So it's a very interesting dynamic for me for the conversation to. I think it's important for Guyanese to have the conversation, especially now with the Venezuela situation ongoing, and the Venezuela immigrant situation as well. Right, undocumented people coming in, and there you go.
You're talking about the right not to be deprived of your liberty.
Yeah.
So if they're coming here and they're being locked up, it's unconstitutional. And if they're not being locked up, as you say, lose it on the road,
right.
Then there's no processing system at all.
Yeah, and we know what those types of situations do to societies. The crime element, when people are desperate to survive, what occurs?
We need an unequivocal statement from the government.
Absolutely.
This is not going to happen.
Absolutely. All right, I'm going to switch gears for a second because I had the chance to spend some time at the energy conference that just occurred. My rationale for being there, I'm not in the oil industry, my rationale for being there was, if I'm going to sit on a platform like this and I'm going to discuss matters regarding the oil industry, I have to be there firsthand and I have to be in the rooms when the conversations are being had. So I decided I was going to attend.
All right, good for you.
All right. One of the conversations, I think probably the key one for me that I think needs to be shown here is the president had his first speech on the opening day. And one of the highlights from his speech is he has highlighted, I'm going to ask Robbie to bring up the graphic, is that he's decided that the government is in the final stages of discussing a oil refinery here in Guyana with a U.S. company. So here it is. It's the clip just states very basic. Just to show everyone, government finalizing refined energy products agreement with U.S. company. So that refined products is a refinery that he's discussing, and it was brought up yesterday. I can't remember. I think it was like 60 or 70,000 barrels per day that it would be able to refine. The selling point was that, we would get fuel cheaper and Guyanese, energy costs would go down. And then what was probably my favorite part of the conversation was they have big plans to sell it to our neighbors. Our neighbors being Suriname, an oil-producing nation, Trinidad, an oil-producing nation, Brazil, an oil-producing nation, and Venezuela, an oil-producing nation. So I wasn't exactly sure who was buying our oil.
Or how we were going to get the oil there.
Well, the logistics, I think, were...
That infrastructure logistics.
Right. So, and again, natural gas as well. I was actually lucky. I was there on the second day as well, and it was an interesting conversation because a Surinamese representative, I didn't get his title, but his conversation was talking about the comparisons between Guyana and Suriname and where the stages they are versus us. And one of the highlights that I took from it was the conversation was discussing the connection between Brazil and the Guyanas. And the IDB had put forward a proposal to connect all the four of these countries, being Brazil, French Guiana, Suriname, and Guyana, through energy. And the main proposal was through hydro energy. And what was interesting about the statement made by the Surinamese representative was he said Brazil is heavily on hydro, Suriname is heavily on hydro. And he said, Guyana has this golden opportunity with hydro, in which it's a much more modern development that can happen. They'll use less forest, less impact on the environment, right? And he said he really hopes to see Guyana develop this hydro project. That was met by a conversation of, well, we are about to invest even heavier into fossil fuels, develop a fossil fuel gas to energy project, and then already having done the calculations, it will not be enough as currently proposed. So we are thinking about building a second one right next door to that one. And then even wider and further down the line, we want to build one in Berbice. And I kind of went, these are polar opposite conversations. And I just want to make one more point, just to kind of round off the whole conversation, was the Natural Resource Minister also had his conversation at that time. And he stated that although the world's conversation is moving away from fossil fuels into renewable, sustainable energy, CARICOM and countries like Guyana do not have the resources to do it. I don't know if this was a slip of his tongue, but he said during one of the forums he went to on the international stage, they said for all of CARICOM to transition into renewable, sustainable energy, it would cost in and around $3 billion US. And well, silly me kind of went, but that's what we have. That's what Guyana alone has in their Natural Resource Fund account currently. Yeah. So I kind of went, well, wait a second. Why are you stating that there's not enough resources to do this when us alone can fund the entire CARICOM to do it?
Well, that's a bit extreme.
I'm not saying we should. I'm just stating the resources are available.
All right.
At least for Guyana to do it. So, that was an interesting conversation that was being had.
Let me tell you the difference between...
And then we'll get to the refinery.
Private entrepreneurship and government being in business. And the reason government should never be in business. If we decide we're going to start a refinery, we got to plan the whole thing out. So we have to figure out, having studied it, having looked at raw material costs of construction, costs of employment, all of those things, this thing's going to cost us $100. We go to the bank to borrow $100, and we have to calculate that after we build this thing for $100, it's going to earn us $10 a year, so that in 10 years we can pay it back.
Right.
When we do all of that maths, if it turns out to cost more than $100, we go bust.
That's right. It fails.
If we don't make $10 a year, we go bust.
That's right.
The thing with capitalism is that it is unforgiving. It is like Darwin. The fittest survive, and most don't. Let me tell you about a government business. You will get revenue every year.
Free money.
So you will go to the people and you will say, we're going to build this thing, you're going to get cheap electricity, it's only going to cost $100. And then when you've spent the first $100, you could quietly say, my cost $200, but don't worry, because we get in more tax money next year.
Right.
So we put in more.
Good.
And then you say, but we're going to get $10 a year profit after we built this thing over budget. We haven't gone bust as we should have gone bust. But
because we've bailed ourselves out
with taxpayers' money. But we now realize that we're not going to make $10. We're going to make $5. But don't worry about that, because we got more taxpayers' money coming in. Now, if you think that I'm talking nonsense, I ask you to consider the situation in Gaisuko, where every year the government says, don't worry, next year we're going to produce more sugar. We're going to earn more money. And every year the government puts billions of dollars, subsidies into Gaisuko. And every year Gaisuko makes less sugar, less sugar, less sugar, and is not making money. It should have gone bust long ago. If you think that's a single example, think about GPL, where every year government has to subsidize and GPL is not doing the job they should do, and we're getting blackout all the time. Listen, I champion, I celebrate any investor who comes to say they want to open a refinery. But I want that investor to do their maths, to decide how much it's going to cost, to spend their own money, so have their skin in the game, to use a nice American expression. And when they have spent their own money, they sink or they swim. If I know that government is contributing taxpayers' money toward the endeavor, I start to worry. Because we have too many carpetbaggers, another American expression. These people have been doing this hundreds of years before us. We now learn it. But we got too many people who come in and say, I'm an expert, and don't worry that I don't have any money to invest. Because I'm an expert, you must pay me a management fee, and I'm going to get this done using your money. And then it doesn't work, and it's over budget, and you spent money on the so-called experts. If they're coming to spend their own money, I celebrate it. Let them do it. If they're not spending their own money, I don't want to hear that some foreigners coming to spend our taxpayer money in some joint arrangement with the government. I agree. The wrong way to go.
I agree.
And when you look at the
energy project, yes,
that is over budget, over time. We don't know what's going on, and as you say, we now hear that you can't just have one because there'll be transmission issues, which everybody knew from day one.
That's
you got to build another one.
That's correct.
And then you got to build a third in Berbice. Well, that should have gone bust long ago. But why isn't it going bust?
Because they're using our taxpayers' money to do it.
Because the Natural Resource Fund got more money than they can spend.
That's right.
And you have to say, where's the fiscal responsibility?
I would like to point out a very interesting factor. So the first part of the energy conference, the first, again, another aspect that I picked up when the gas to energy project was being had was right off the bat, Exxon was very proud to say, we have done our part. The government has asked us to build the pipeline, and we have built the pipeline, and it is complete, and all we're waiting for is the plant to turn the tap on. Okay, and they showed the pipe being built, and then they did a nice aerial view of the gas energy project, and there's just a lot of sand there. All right, so we are not even remotely close to that project coming on.
But I want to point to the other side of this too. You see, I just talked about Gaisuko as a failed organization, a failed commercial endeavor. You don't respond to it like the opposition did by just shutting it down. You have to find a commercially feasible, plausible way to extricate yourself with the least loss, and the least loss to the employees, and the best return you can get on the asset that is on the ground. So when the PNC shut that down, as they callously did in 2015, 2016, they showed that they were even more irresponsible than their predecessors. When the majority opposition in Parliament cut the purse strings, cut the funding for the Amalia Falls project, so that billions had been spent, and then it all frittered away to nothing. That was on par. But you see, you cannot just look at this thing black and white like that. You have to understand that if in the first place the government of the day had gone to the opposition and said, here's our idea, what do you think?
Here's a transparent implementation.
And the opposition looked at the figures and said, yes, this could work. We give our stamp of approval. Then when the government changes, the economic policy continues seamlessly. That doesn't happen now. So Amalia Falls goes, government talking about bringing it back. Gaisuko goes, government brought it back. So you have hiccups, economically speaking. You got massive loss every time because each party, when they're in government, does their own thing unilaterally, dictatorially. And this goes back to my firm position that I want to tell every Guyanese. A third party with an opposition in Parliament will force any government to get the agreement of the other side for an economic policy. So if you want to allocate money from Parliament, from the Consolidated Fund to the gas to shore, the other side got to agree. And then if the government changes or if there's an issue,
it will continue.
It continues seamlessly, and that is called fiscal responsibility.
Yes. Yeah, it's a simple concept, and I know a lot of the entrenched are not going to understand it. The extreme PPP and PNC, because they have been taught that it must be a two-party system and one winner must take everything, and either we have the best ideas or their ideas are best, and the other side is just terrible. So they're not understanding the concept of how another organization in the middle, another political party, a third party in the middle, creating a minority, will force the PPP and the PNC to work together to make decisions together. And then, as you said, all of us will benefit because it will continue no matter who's in government. It's a really simple concept. And unfortunately, we have to accept that only the 20,000 we spoke about earlier will understand. The rest are trained. The rest are brainwashed into saying we can never work with that side. We can never do anything that they are speaking about because they don't know what they're doing. They're stupid and they're bad people.
Right. And they will simplistically say to you, look at Somalia Falls. You started it and those terrible people cut it off. But you started it without consulting.
Yeah.
You started it deciding on your own how to award the contracts, who to award the contracts.
Yes.
That's the wrong approach.
Correct.
That is looking after your people and vindicating the point of view of those other people that they have been excluded.
Yes. It's simple. So I just want to point out the other two things that I found interesting. Well, about the refinery project, which I'm sorry, I can't lend support to just based on the macro side of things. The first one being, every time the gas energy project would come up now, the government gets very wishy-washy on whether or not it's going to be 50% less for electricity. All of a sudden it turns into, it should be around 50%. So that number has clearly struck a chord with them in there. And I'm getting a lot of hesitation from them committing to this 50% now. Not to mention, and this is for all the Guyanese living here, not the ones abroad that think that they know what's going on. I can challenge all of the Guyanese locally here to say that you should probably check your electricity bill, because over the last year and a half or so, I'm pretty sure it's almost doubled. So bringing it down 50%, let's say they miraculously do it, bringing it down 50% will carry it back to what it was a year ago? So let's be honest. How much further are we going when it comes to this gas? How much will it benefit us? Put it that way. The second part of it was, I have to use an example from 20, 30 years ago that I cannot understand why the government of Guyana would think that it will work here, but didn't work in Trinidad. So this whole idea, again, sold to Trinidad the same way. We are going to sell to all the other non-oil producing nations. We will be the hub because we're in the middle of the Caribbean. We're the biggest oil producing nation in the Caribbean. And we can just refine the oil here and we'll just sell it to all the islands and everybody will buy from us. And we'll be the energy hub and everybody, the breadbasket of the Caribbean, if you will, for energy needs. It failed in Trinidad. Why is it going to work here?
And here's my thing. I don't care if it's going to work or not. What I care about is that if I'm not competent to do the maths, to do the calculation, to make the analysis, and to look at the technology and infrastructure, to decide whether to invest or not, I'm not going to do it.
Yeah.
Our government is not competent to do it. If an investor,
GPL.
If a private investor wants to come and invest, I will celebrate.
Good.
I will break out the champagne and say, come and invest, spend your money, power to you, I will help you the best I can on a level playing field.
Yep.
Not giving you advantages that I'm not giving to other Guyanese. So you got to pay your taxes like other Guyanese. We got to reassess our fair tax system.
Yeah.
But if you can make this thing float, it can only be good for us. So go strong and do it, but do it with your own money.
With your own money, not with our money. Agreed. Completely agreed. On that note though, Tim, we are at our time. Right, Robbie? Thank you very much, guys. It was a nice, quick conversation. We kept it rolling.
We missed two of the points.
We missed two of the points. I know. I will just make this point very, very clear to you guys. I will be discussing the Madia court case. Actually, it's good. Probably better to discuss it next week, because I know there's things that have to evolve this week in that situation. On that note, what was the other one I missed? The other topic? I can't remember. We had another good one. Anyways, leave it. Not important. We'll do it next week. This is MASH weekend.
Be safe, drive safe, stop at the pedestrian crossing for pedestrians, stop at the stop sign, drive courteously, let other drivers go.
I have to bring this point up. Somebody brought up to me, my sister actually brought this point up to me. She said, she doesn't live here, she lives in Canada. She said, you know what I think is the biggest issue with the fact that duties are so high on bringing in new vehicles into this country? The fact that your guys are having so many deaths on the road, so many accidents. And if you had the newer cars with the newer systems and the newer safety precautions, so many more people would survive the accidents for one, and so many more of the accidents could be avoided. For example, most of the new cars have, for example, automatic braking. When you run up behind, if you're driving too quickly, they have all kinds of indicators. They have the safety bags that have completely been reconstructed for the car. So much more safety features that the older cars don't have.
I don't know how many pedestrians that's going to save.
Agreed, but it would save the minibus, the passengers in the minibuses.
One item that we needed to talk about that we didn't was the corruption perception index. And
we forgot.
Deal with that in 2 weeks because that also needs to be.
That will be talked about. Nonetheless, guys, on that note, thank you so much for joining us. Have a wonderful MASH weekend. We will be back here. I'll have a show organized for next week, Friday. All right, guys, be safe out there. Have a great MASH, Romani. Take care.
Take care, everyone.